Welcome back to Behavioral Science for Brands, a podcast where we bridge the gap between academics and practical marketing. Each week, we sit down and go deep behind some of America's most successful brands. I'm Michael Aaron Flicker.
And I'm Richard Shotton.
In this week's episode of Behavioral Science for Brands, Richard and I sat down with Dan Ariely, professor of psychology and behavioral economics at Duke University, a founding member of the Center of Advanced Hindsight, and an author of a number of best-selling books. In fact, we had so much fun, we jumped right in, and we didn't even get a chance to give him his proper introduction. For those listening at home that may not know about Dan, he is the author of 3 New York Times best-selling books and many others. He's shared his own personal journey, which has helped improve the lives of so many and our understanding of how people think and how people act. And he's been wildly generous with so many to share his thinking, and he was so generous with us. Dan, welcome to Behavioral Science for Brands. Richard and I have made it our little mission to be on the hunt for finding behavioral science, understanding what it reveals about people, about us as humans, and then helping business owners and brands apply it to their world marketing. We're very excited to have you on the show today. So thank you for being here.
Lovely to be here, and I think you picked a very interesting and complex task because I think that to start with, brands are not one thing. We call them with one name, but there's a very difference between something that people are proud of and something that people remember when they're in the supermarket. These are just not, we use brands for both, but very, very different brands. So brands represent lots of very different psychological processes. Really, really, really very interesting.
It's funny that you picked that out right at the front, because we've had a previous guest, Ariely, on, who spoke about how brands must solve for a psychological need, which sounds pretty lofty when you're making toothpaste, but actually there is something much deeper and more complex than just thinking we're delivering products by themselves. There's a bigger artifice going on here.
If I had to think about kind of the unifying element of brands, it's basically about the existence of the product in the consumer's mind. So if you think about what is a unifying theme of all brands, it's products have an existence in the real world, consumers have an existence in the real world, and brand is the impact that they're having on the consumer's brains. Now, not all brands have the same type of impact on a consumer's brain. As we said before, some brands, their benefit is with their familiarity. Mm-hmm. I walk in the supermarket, there are many things written. Some are easier for me to process because I've seen them before, either at home or in the supermarket or in ads. So I process them faster. That's a function of the brand. It's the impact that their packaging has on my brain, is that it's more fluent, easier to read, digest, and so on. On the other hand, you have brands, and I think maybe the best example are cars, where if I tell you the brand of a car that somebody drives, you can probably tell me quite a lot about the person. Not so true for toothpaste. Mm-hmm. But that's an identity statement. When somebody buys a car, one of the questions they ask themselves is, who am I? What identity do I want to project? And that's a very different deliberate process, and lots of things in the middle, of course.
Yeah. But even with those examples, and you've picked cars and toothpaste, which in many respects feel as far apart as you can get, even those wildly different brands, they won't have a single issue that they're facing at any one time. There'll be thousands of things they're trying to do. So a car might want to make their price in the dealership look great.
Yeah.
and therefore they use the pennies a day effect. They talk about they don't talk about it being $40,000. They say it's £100 a month forever. And the
That's right.
toothpaste could apply the same principle by saying, look, you can buy a pack of 12. Let's not talk about the total price. Let's talk about the per unit price. So if you start thinking about these, like lots of different questions every single brand has, there might be times when wildly different brands could use the same psychological principle. I think
That's right.
that's
But in
quite
this but
useful.
in this case, I would say these are not branding questions. They're product questions, right? So you're saying every product needs a price. Price have different effects. Every product can think about what is our strategy in terms of scarcity, in terms of perception of fairness of price. There's all kinds of other things. But when you say branding, when you say the branding part of brands, now brands have other things to do. But when you talk about branding, for me, the essence is is different. They have supply chain, production, compliance with the law, all kinds of other things. But the branding itself is where the interesting differences
Mm.
are there, and we kind of live in an interesting world right now. In the car world, we have all of these new electrical cars that many of them. You look in the streets and there are all kinds of cars you probably never heard of them and you don't even care that much. Um, on the other hand, there's all kinds of ethical brands that are popping out when we're thinking about what is my identity in terms of my consumption of food, for example. So those I think the core questions of branding are really about the relationship between the consumer and the product. The interesting questions are that relationship.
And this may be very practical, but often in doing a lot of branding exercises, what I've felt about people that walk down the shelf is they're much more likely to be deselecting than even selecting. So as they walk down, well, I'm not a bottom shelf buyer. Well, I don't. This type of hand soap does not represent me, and they end up with a much narrower set of the available brands to begin with. And then to your point, Dan, what do those brands occupy in the mind of the buyer? And that's a pretty quick association. This is not a logical, rational, drawn out evaluation. There's something much quicker happening here.
Yeah. The standard, the old story on communication is the tale of the peacock.
Tell us.
And the tale of the peacock is the story is called the handicap principle.
Mm.
And the tail of a peacock is heavy and uncomfortable. And you would say, why would an animal go around with a heavy, uncomfortable tail? In fact, if you take young peacock and you stitch to them long tails, they get eaten faster. It's inefficient to have a long tail. So why do they have this? It's because they want to communicate truthfully. So imagine I'm a peacock male. What do I want to communicate to the female? Look at me, I'm really strong. Now, in the animal kingdom, I can't write in my Facebook page, look at me, I'm really strong. I have to prove that I'm really strong. And the proof is the tail. And the tail has to come with a real cost. Nature is not allowing animals to lie too much about their strength. So you want to say that you're strong? Show that you're really strong. Otherwise, the female would not listen. Like if one day a peacock came and said, forget tails. Look at my eyelashes, how wonderful they are. I think said, no, I'm trusting the tail. The tail is a real signal of strength because I know that if you were not as strong, you would have been dead by now. So this is the original story of communication in nature is communicating truthfully something. And branding is still doing that role for us, right? So now we did a really interesting study. We wrote on people's T-shirt, generous or stingy, and we got them to walk around campus for a few hours and come back, and We said, oh, before you take the shirts off, we have one other experiment, and we gave them a task in which they could be either generous or stingy. And it turns out that the word had an impact. People that communicated I'm generous kept on being generous. People communicated stingy kept on and communicated stingy. But what was interesting in the experiment, what also was interesting, is that for half the people, the print on the shirt was on the inside. So they knew it was printed, but nobody else knew. And that had a very similar effect. So that means that when we communicate, we don't just communicate to others, we also communicate to ourselves. Now, I think that this storytelling element of branding is often not done enough. And I think that we as people should do more of it. Um, we have an opportunity to convey meaning in all kinds of things that we do. And sometimes the brand is taking care of the meaning, but sometimes you could say, no, that's not enough for me. I want to extract more from that. So imagine you go to a vineyard. You can say, oh, this vineyard in the south of France, they took care of branding already. But you know what? If you go yourself to that vineyard and you spend an afternoon looking at the hills and drinking wine with somebody you love, you'll enjoy that wine later more, right? You've basically said the branding expert of this vineyard have not finished their job. I have some work to do as well. I can add to the meaning. So, and you can say to yourself, this wine is not just wine. It represents my weekend away. It represents this amazing day I had. It represents all kinds of things. So eventually, again, there is branding. Nothing against toothpaste, but there is branding that is very, very simple. But there's a slightly interesting branding and very interesting branding. The very interesting branding, I think, it's about the stories, kind of the peacock's tail. It's about the stories we tell others about ourselves and the stories we tell ourselves. And these brands help us tell our story. And from that perspective, they're incredibly interesting and useful.
I think the two super interesting bits there. There's the kind of story part, and then there's almost that bit that you said around the unfakeable signal. I think there's arguments for people like, I think it was Amina Kamani, that an extravagant ad spend is an unfakeable signal. Because if you are spending on 90-second TV ads, billboards in Times Square, you have a genuine faith in your product. Because if you thought your product was awful, well, you're going to go bust very quickly, because that type of extravagant spend only pays back in the long term. So you're showing this unshakable faith that if you try my product, you're going to come back again and again. So I think sometimes you've got this screening mechanism that advertising fulfills.
That's right. And in the digital world, we have more and more of non-verifiable signals. And again, nature would have never allowed that, right? Communication in nature doesn't allow. There's sometimes like you can puff up and say, "Oh, look at I'm stronger than I am," but there's a limit to it, and nature tries to convey the signals as being true. We have created very interesting artificial communication environments that are allowing for all kinds of new opportunities, but including conveying a non-true signal.
So advertisers need to think, don't say I'm trustworthy, I'm high quality.
That's right.
Think, what behavior could I exhibit that would only work if I were trustworthy or high quality? What is the thing that those low quality, low trust people wouldn't engage in?
So for example, saying, here's a place for you to complain if things are not working well. Or if you say, we have a hotline for people who are unhappy. Or here, all the people who've complained before. Like all of these things are basically saying, look, I'm exposing myself, right? All of these trust building stages are basically saying, I'm opening myself up to prove that nobody's complaining, or not a lot of people are complaining all the time. I have a long-term interest. Long-term, by the way, is also very interesting, right? So, how do you communicate long-term aligned interest, right? I'm not just here for myself, I'm also here from you, and I'm not only here for myself and for you, I'm here for our long-term best interest. Is also an interesting part of it, right? So um, even if I'm a product that offers a loyalty program, it says something, right? I'm expecting long-term return. Or if I offer you a trial period, it says I trust those things. A lot of it has to do with this difficulty of communicating an authentic signal, and we're looking for other things to add to that. I'm going to jump for a second on something else that I love, which is there's a term called consumption vocabulary. So we mentioned the wine in the south of France that you could we can add to our enjoyment. Another interesting thing is consumption vocabulary. And consumption vocabulary is basically a way to take our experience and enhance it. So again, take wine because they're the experts. Wine has tannin and complexity and acidity. What does it do? So imagine you sit there by your computer and you have a mug with wine. I don't have wine, but imagine you have wine. And you drink it as you talk to other people. How much will you enjoy that wine? A little bit. What if you have a consumption vocabulary? What happens now? Now you stop, you pause, you lift the glass, you turn it around, you smell the wine, you pause, you pay attention. And not only do you pay attention, you have a language that directs what you're going to pay attention to. You pay attention to the color, you pay attention to the leg, you pay attention to the tannin, you pay attention to all kinds of things. And at the end of it, it's a more wonderful and memorable experience. So when you think about a product, it's not just about the product, it's about directing people's attention at the consumption and influencing their memory for the experience. Even chocolate, some of the good chocolate makers have instructions on the box on how to eat chocolate. You would say, hey,
I haven't seen that.
don't we know? Don't we know? It turns out you want to take a bite, you want to keep the chocolate in your mouth, you want the temperature to penetrate, you want it to melt, you want to focus on it. It's a different eating experience. So when I what I'm saying is that I think that brands are starting to do a really good job for us on meaning and quality and attention and so on, but they have a way to go. Right? How much would you like? Where is our value in life? So imagine, could we, when we think about good wine, it's really an amazing category that we took, and we are enhancing our experience further with slowing and paying attention and so on. Where else are we missing opportunities like that? I'm going to skip one. I'm going to quickly jump for one more thing. I recently started printing things from the people in my lab on their T-shirts. So I print T-shirts and I give away for people in my lab. And I'm kind of using this principle that says, it's about communication. So each of our shirts communicates something. Now, didn't think about it very much this morning when I put a T-shirt on, but they have an opportunity to communicate, and we have an opportunity to communicate to ourselves and to others. So, for example, I give one T-shirt away that says, I will not procrastinate." What does it say when you wear this shirt? What does it do to you? What does it do to other people around you? What do people think in the morning when they take this T-shirt out? I have another one that basically says science suggests that people enjoy compliments more than they expect. Help prove science right. Um, but more seriously, I think that I actually am. One day I'll find a fashion designer who would want to work with me on expanding our communication through clothes. Right? We have all kinds of things, um, but I think there's a lot of opportunities for that. Um,
And,
Sorry about the randomness, but I was at the party at some point, some event, and I met Calvin Klein, and I wanted to talk to him, and I told him about kind of our research on signaling, on the I'm stingy, I'm generous, and so on, and I told him about communication and so on, and he said he had the suit, of course. He said, you see this buttonhole in my suit? I said, yes. He said, you see, it's blue, but there's one thread that is red. I said, yes, I can see it. What is it? He said, that's some very high order achievement from the in France that he got. And he said, this is very few people understand this signal. It's a buttonhole with one red thread, but he says, I know about it. And the few people I care about mostly know about it. So anyway, there's a world of communication that is going on in the world of branding that I think has lots of value, but also not enough. Lots of things could be better.
The other side of the coin, in a number of the stories that connect what you shared so far, Dan, is that there's agency of the receiver to finish the thought. So to me, in your story of those that look at a brand, those that know what the T-shirt says, they've got to complete the thought. And does that make it more sticky when the person that is receiving the information helps complete the idea? Is that part of the experience of branding, in that you're talking about what the brand has to insert, it has to say out to the world? The other half of it is that the receiver has to take it in. I wonder how that connects.
Yeah, it because in this kind of world, the impact of the brain is the impact of the brand is inside the brains of the consumers. The consumers have to be active in some way. They have to choose it. They have to think about it. It's not passive. When you think about the passive part of branding, it's probably about speed of recognition, or kind of some automated assumptions or associations. But the more complex branding, I think, has this other element that we need to be active in it, and a lot of the value comes from there.
Lovely. You talk about how the brain, I've heard you talk about how the brain is like a vintage Swiss Army knife. And that can help marketers think a little bit about when they want to send a message with these more interesting, complex messages, how they can think about receivers. Can you just explain that analogy for everybody and help understand what we mean by that?
Yeah, so now we're leaving the pure world of branding, and we're talking now about marketing more generally, or any behavioral change, really. So the vintage Swiss Army knife metaphor basically has two components: Swiss Army knife and vintage. Let's start with the Swiss Army knife. The idea here is that the human brain, is as a decision-making tool, is not great. It's quite good in lots of things, but it's not great. The Swiss Army knife is not great at anything. There's not a single task in which you said, "Oh, I want to do X. Where is my Swiss Army knife? I want a can opener. Where is my Swiss Army knife? I want tweezers. Where is this? I want a Phillips screwdriver." The Swiss Army knife gets its greatness from doing lots of things kind of okay in a small, compact way. We have the same thing. Not so great, lots of things. We're very versatile. We can solve lots of problems. Not so great, quite okay, lots of things. But here comes the vintage part. And the vintage part is the part where our Swiss Army knife, our brain, was designed as a decision-making tool in a very different environment. It was designed in an environment in which we roamed the savannah and we had to deal with lions and scarce food, and we didn't have cryptocurrency or retirement or school choices, chemotherapy, all kinds of things like that. So we carry with us this vintage Swiss Army knife. It was never that good to start with. It was kind of okay in lots of things, but now it's kind of okay in lots of things, but lots of them are irrelevant. And there are lots of tools that if we created the human brain right now, we would have created different tools, like compound interest. No tool for compound interest. But that's what we have. And I think that when people want to think about behavioral change, they have to understand that. They have to understand that if we want people to come to the table and make good decisions, the decisions have to be compatible with our vintage Swiss Army knife. So take a very simple example. You show people interest rate on mortgages, 3.4, 3.5, 4.2. People can tell you very easily which one is a better mortgage, which one is a worse mortgage. You add another dimension to it, like points, something you pay up front, and then people get completely lost. You add one dimension, all of a sudden it's too much. So when you think about now, if you want people to make bad decisions, you don't want to fix it. But if you wanted to fix it, you would say, these two dimensions, too complex. We don't have a tool for that. They are two different. Let's merge them into one dimension. Let's create a tool that help people understand that in a better way. And now you've solved the problem. So we need to understand what are our natural ability. What are we generally okay in, and what are the kind of tasks that we just don't have the right tools, and because of that we need something external. Now, it's not the end of the world that we don't have these tools, right? We all have a hard time standing for many hours, but we invented chairs, perfectly fine. Our feet are a little bit delicate, so we invented shoes. It's not the end of the world to say we don't have the right tools for the job. In our physical world, I need glasses. It's not the end of the world to say our natural abilities are not perfect. Just say, let's recognize it and let's fix it. So I think that kind of recognizing what we're naturally good at, what we're naturally not, and adding tools to the places where we're not naturally good at is kind of crucial.
Yeah. And Dan, your work has straddled academia and the business world. How did you take that principle and apply it when you were chief behavioral officer at Lemonade? I mean, what were the kind of vintage elements of the human mind that you managed to design for?
So Lemonade, by the way, unbelievable company. I love them. I love them dearly. When I met the two founders, first time there was no company yet, and they asked me, from a social science perspective, what is insurance and what is missing? By the way, many times when I come to help companies, it's like in the game. It's not on day one. And then we're limited in what we get to do. Lemonade was a unique opportunity, almost unique opportunity, where it was very early, starting from scratch, insurance company, we know that. What is the essence of insurance company and what is missing in that mix? And I said, look, the thing from my perspective that is missing in the mix is trust. I say, insurance emerged for corporations, right? We were 100 people living next to each other. We said sometimes bad things happen to some people. Let's put a little money and we'll figure out who has lost their crops and we'll pay everybody. But that was it. But then it became professionally managed. It wasn't 100 people who knew each other and cared about each other. There was a corporation that managed the risk for other people. And that corporation gets to make more money when claims don't get paid. Now, if you think about insurance this way, it's kind of crazy. You as a consumer pay. At some point, something bad happens, and you want the insurance company to pay you back. But what does the insurance company want? Not to pay you back. I mean, it's very simple. Now, you know they don't want to pay you back. That they'll try to find all kinds of things that are exceptions and not on. So what do? You exaggerate a little bit. Many people think that, they'll cheat me by 10%. Let me exaggerate by 10% in the beginning so that it will even it. The insurance company knows that we're exaggerating. So what do? They make the process difficult, complex, painful, time-consuming, and costly. Everybody loses. Everybody loses. If the adjudication process costs, let's say, $500, it's $500 that got wasted. Right? So I said, look, the problem is insurance, trust. Trust. How do we create? And I said, look, it would be amazing if we can try and create an insurance company that is built from day one on being trustworthy. And I said, how do you do it? I said, look, like we said before, cheap signals, right? You can't say, oh, trust me, right? We are the trusted insurance company. It's not going to work. I said, you can say things like that would support the claim, but you need to do something that is inherent to the issue. You basically have to eliminate conflicts of interest. I said, we would never design, we got there, but you would never design a company that makes more money when they reject their consumers' claims. Like it's a crazy situation to think that we got there. So they said, okay, how do you do it? And I came up with the following idea. I said, if you have two parties, consumers and insurance company, you will always have the problem that you have to split the pie. So if you get less, they get more. Like it's inherent, that problem. I said, let's move it to a three-party game. Instead of two parties, three parties. What are the three parties? The consumers, the insurance company, Lemonade, and charities that people love. That's the setup. Now, when you start, you tell people, look, we're going to charge you such and such a month. We will take as profit a fixed percentage. Let's call it 20%. We'll never take more, we'll never take less. But you will pick a charity of your choice. You will choose a charity that you love. And all the people who pick that charity will be in one pool. And you will pay money, we will take 20%, 80% will be in a pool. The pool would pay all the people that belong to that pool. And at the end of the year, we're planning on money to being left in that pool. All the money that will be left in that pool will go to the charity of your choice. So first of all, what happened is we as Lemonade don't make more and don't make less if we reject or accept claim. We always make whatever percentage we agreed on in the beginning. We have no conflicts of interest. That's really important. By the way, conflicts of interest have a way to corrode companies. It's not about bad people. Good people with bad conflicts of interest end up acting badly. Not a good idea to have conflicts of interest. But the second thing is that imagine you're a customer and imagine you're considering cheating on your insurance claim. Something bad happens. If you cheat, who are you cheating? Your favorite charity, right? So this particular method basically says we have no conflicts of interest, very, very important. And we say, and you, by the way, if you decide to cheat, the people who would pay for it is your favorite insurance, and all the people that you belong to, all that pool of people who love the worldwide fund or whatever. Now, lots of things. That was for me, that was the backbone of the company. Lots of things added on top of that. But for example, very quickly after we started, we got an email from somebody, like week one or something. And that person said, I got insurance from you. Thank you very much. I wrote you that I lost my laptop. You paid me back very quickly. By the way, if we trust people, we can pay back very quickly. Right? Sometimes in 3 seconds you already have a TV on from Amazon on the way to you because we trust you. Anyway, this guy says, you paid for me. I got the check. Guess what? I found my laptop today. And he said, how do I return the money to you? Now, we love that email. And I wrote all the people I know from insurance company. And I said, how often does this happen? Nobody I talk to has a form for this particular particular incident, right? So I think the trust is incredibly important. Now, AI, by the way, is doing a lot of good things for ability to verify and do all kinds of things in a better way. And I'll give you another story. There was a snowstorm coming to New York, and we wrote people a very nice kind of infographics about how to prepare their homes for the storm. And when I talk to people from other insurance companies about it, they say people don't believe us because they think we're doing it for our purposes, not for their purposes. But I said, look, but of course, if people don't have damage, everybody wins. It's not just you. People love that infographics because it was clear we're not saying, oh, we want you to do something that is good for us, but not necessarily good for you. Now, there's lots of other things about Lemonade that are just amazing. Insurance companies, it's a tough business, complex, takes a long time, regulated, all kinds of things. But for me, the basics was to say, let's talk about what insurance is. It's about one of the basic things is trust. Let's figure out how do we bake trust into the company from the DNA, not fixing it after something breaks.
Yeah, and that's fascinating. You say that the biggest impact you can have applying some of these principles of behavioral science is being there at the very design of the company.
Yeah.
For businesses that don't have that luxury, they've been around for 100 years. Are there simple things they could learn from Lemonade that were done as really small interventions, little tweaks at the end, but had a disproportionate effect? Are there still things in that area that could be?
So there's a lot. A lot of things are about reminders at the moment, right? So if you think about what we think about as a mindset, when people, so whenever I come to a problem, I ask the people that we're working on together. Let's say the two of you came from an insurance company and we're working on an insurance issue. I would say let's assume for now that people are amateur insurance purchasers. Let's assume that they don't know what anything means, that they're amateurs, and let's ask ourselves questions about amateurs. And you would say, what if people don't know what is insurance for an uninsured motorist? Or let's assume that people don't know what is the replacement cost of a house. By the way, when you do this exercise, you always say, of course people don't know. You say, let's talk about online dating. Let's assume people don't know who would be a good partner for them. Say, oh, of course people don't know. Look, we are kind of amateurs in almost everything we do. Some of us know a little bit more in one domain, but mostly we're kind of amateurs, and the world expects us to be experts. So with Lemonade, a lot of the process is to say, what if people don't know that much? How do we make it easy and understandable, and how do we increase confidence, and so on?
Your point about it kind of seems obvious, but the problem is people who work in insurance companies are professionals. They're not amateurs. They know all this stuff. To them, it's really obvious. It is slightly unnatural to put yourself in the shoes of someone who doesn't know. It's a hard task.
That's right. We call this the curse of knowledge. So it happens a lot to professors, right? We teach for many years, kind of the same thing. At some point, it becomes incredibly trivial. Saying, who who came here don't knowing what not knowing what the compound interest is, or who came here not knowing what loss aversion is, or what the endowment effect is, haven't you? So it feels part of nature. And it's a real challenge. The other thing is that we use a language in companies, and we use a language that helps organize our thoughts, and it's a very, very effective mechanism. But once that language gets established, it becomes natural for us, and it's very hard for us to think about how unnatural it is for other people. So, but if I think about where is kind of behavioral economics helpful on the opposite side of being there in the beginning, probably the biggest impact is the concept of friction. And friction is really the idea that anything that people do is much harder for people to do than we think it will be. You say, oh, signing up for this thing is one click. Very difficult click. You might think it's easy. Or, we did an experiment with a big company where people had to enter the what does their business do? And, people thought, like, don't people know? It turns out lots of people don't know, and lots of people are not sure, and lots of people are worried about what this question means. Say, oh, so I have a bakery, but I also sell coffee. What do I write? And if I write the wrong thing, would it not understand me correctly? Or, I'm a wedding photographer, but I really am also an artist in the process. What do I write, and what will happen to my business as a consequence of that? So, the people, we think, shouldn't people know what they're doing? The answer is yes, but so I think you can never overestimate how difficult every step that you ask people to take, how difficult it is. The other thing I would say is that I have grown to have a deep appreciation for people's times. Before the internet revolution, we thought that when the internet would come, we will have lots of free time. All these things will be happening for us, and we'll have lots of free time, and we'll see what will happen with AI about it. But the reality is that we became just more busy.
Yeah.
Right? Before the internet came, you would want to go for a vacation for a week. You would stop by a travel agent, and in 30 minutes you had train tickets and flight tickets, a hotel, and tickets for the museum, and this was it. It may be not ideal, but now, hundreds of hours into it, you're still not sure which hotel you're going to have. We became all self-service. We are our own bankers and our own travel agents, and I understand why it happened, but the reality is that people are really stressed for time. And when I want people to do something, I basically said, these people are really, really stressed for time. And I am going to do whatever I can to make sure that the demand on people's times are going to be as minimal as possible, because I recognize that people don't have that much time.
And I'm going to interrupt this amazing conversation because we made a promise to Dan that we would end on time today. And so it pains me to ask us to come to a close. But out of respect for everyone's time, Dan, can you help us wrap up with a final thought for those that are running their businesses, growing their brands? What's one of the top most important insights into human decision making that you would leave them with? We just went through two great ones. How much friction it takes to get through every step. Really appreciating everyone's time and how stretched and stressed they are for time. Is there one more nugget you'd leave us with?
Motivation is one of the most mysterious parts of human nature. When I ask people, I say, what are the things that you're proudest of in your life? And the things that most people say are not happy. The things that most, what I mean by happy, they're not things that are filled with moments of joy. People talk about difficult things, writing a poetry book and starting a company and having kids. Human goals, our motivation at the end of the day is directed not toward momentary happiness. It's directed at really feeling connected, and that we have a purpose in life, and that we are achieving something and we're progressing and moving forward and so on. And when I look at most of the things around us, we are not utilizing that part of our psychology. How many of the stuff around us helps you feel the same accomplishment that running a marathon would? How many of the things around you make you feel that you're achieving something, that you're progressing, that you're learning? I think we haven't kind of taken, like, there's a lot of things that we do as hobbies, but how do we take those things that give us a tremendous amount of satisfaction and meaning and connection and so on, and how do we integrate them more into our lives? I think, like, if we say brands are telling us stories, they could tell better stories. Brand help us with consumption vocabulary, they could do a much better job. But I think there's lots of room for also improved motivation. Think about our students. Basically we say grades. That's it. That's all we can do to motivate people to study is to give them grades. We have to be better than that. So that's a direction that I think has huge. Now, can you take every product and make it like running a marathon? Of course not. But can you work on human motivation and integrate some of that? I think absolutely yes.
It's a lovely message to end us on. Thank you very much for your time. For the listeners, if you found this helpful, please leave a like or a comment. Please share this with others that would find this useful. And Dan, we talked about some of the projects that you're working on. We'll make sure to put them in the show notes and make sure everybody knows about them. Thanks again for your time. And until next time, I'm Michael Aaron Flicker.
And I'm Richard Shotton.
Thanks for being with us, Dan.
Behavioral Science for Brands is brought to you by Method One. Recognized as one of the fastest growing companies in America for the third year in a row, featured on Inc.'s 5,000 list. Method One is a proudly independent creative and media agency grounded in behavioral science. They exist to make brands irresistible, helping people discover products, services, and experiences that bring moments of joy to their lives. As behavior change experts, Method One creates emotional connections that drive true brand value for their clients, focusing primarily with indulgence brands in the CPG space. Find out more at methodone.com.